Welcome y'all to the Blackhoof Saloon, a Wild West Exodus podcast. Mosey on up to the bar and get yourself a bottle of firewater or a glass of sarsaparilla and listen to some good old yarns about adventures of law dogs, outlaws, and weird creatures. So set a spell, water your ride or your rider, and get ready to tune up your posses. This is the Blackhoof Saloon.
Howdy, howdy, cowpokes, and welcome to the saloon. Glad you can make it back. This is Eric here, and I am with my host. We have down in Texas, we have Brian.
Yeah, my name is Brian Powell. Many of you know me as Jedi Powell, and happy to hear from you guys again here at the Blackhoof Saloon.
And we also have Tommy with us. Say hello, Tom.
Hey, what's up? This is Tom.
All right, you guys made it to episode 2. We made it to episode 2. Once again, this podcast, Blackhoof Saloon, is a podcast where we talk about the skirmish miniature game, Wild West Exodus. To start off the show, I kind of wanted to come out and thank everybody that kind of supported us and found our first episode on whether it was Podbean. That's where I first uploaded the podcast, and then we got on iTunes. And yeah, I just, from all three of us, we want to thank everybody that, you know, liked or shared or made some kind of comment on Facebook or the Podbean or something like that. It really means a lot to us that you guys are digging the podcast. And like many of you, the three of us are just avid, you know, gamers for this game. We love this game. We like talking about it, hence podcast. And we really are dug deep into the game.
Yeah, it's real encouraging to see you guys, you know, cheer us on and start asking us questions and, you know, hey, when's the next episode? So it definitely encourages us to, you know, push forward and bring you episode 2.
Yep, it was definitely a little energizing to see that. So thanks, everyone.
I think when it comes down to it, I'm kind of surprised that there's people that actually want to listen to us Three Stooges talk about this game.
Well, see, I understand because I can listen to people talk about Wild West Exodus like all the time. So it's not that surprising because I would listen to us.
Let me just reach back here and pat myself on the back.
Yeah, if you hear a thumping sound, that's what that is.
Well, what have we all been up to? Brian, what have you been up to in the world of Wild West Exodus lately? Have you been gaming, doing demos? As we're talking, I can see that you're actually building more stuff to add to your table.
So since the last podcast, I did a small convention outside of Houston, did a bunch of demos. There was a couple weeks later, we had a tournament at Space Cadets out there at the Woodlands, thanks to Brian McMeans. He's really, you know, building a good community up in that way. He's also where I've been ordering my new Wild West Exodus goodies through him, and picked up 4 of the Wild West Exodus War Cradle building set. So I've got me a jail, I've got the metalsmith, I've got the doctor's shack, and I've got the Cartwright, the Iron Horse, you know, garage basically. And a side note that these burnt MDF buildings actually carry a pretty good smell in the hobby area of burnt wood. You know, it's a trade-off, but it's been kind of nice. I also got a new box of Deadly 7 Outlaws, and that's actually what I'm building now. I'm building the 3rd model in the set. I suggest everyone, you know, cut all the A's, build that model, cut all the B's, build that model, so you don't get your parts mixed up. And the 3rd model is the Arrow guy. I'm kind of rusty on the name of that one, but anyone know the name of that Deadly 7 I'm sure
I don't know.
someone was yelling
You called him the C guy.
Yeah, because I didn't remember what his number is. What his name is. He's the Indian with the bow, flaming bow. I don't remember his name.
I'm looking it up right now because now I'm intrigued.
We're definitely gonna, make sure that's all edited right.
Oh yeah, that's the beauty of podcasting.
Black blood. Yeah, I'm in the middle of building Model C in Spruce.
You got the box in front of you?
Blood. Now I do.
Okay, you beat me to it. So, Brian, you're saying basically too with all your new town that you basically have that you don't need potpourri in the room anymore. You just do the MDF smell.
No need for potpourri. If you buy some of these sets, it will bring a very masculine, campfire smell to your hobby area.
Potpourri's for the wife's bathroom, right?
That's right. Although I hear potpourri is also the spray that you can, omit those type of toilet smells from your bathroom.
I don't think it's called potpourri, though. It's potpourri.
That's it.
All right, Tom, what have you been working on lately?
We're in the middle of lacrosse and soccer season in my house with 3 kids, so I'm not working on anything till June.
Okay.
So
You've been studying, though, right?
I've been reading. I have been studying. I've been reading and studying and getting all the rules down and figuring out how to make lists, and that's about all that I've had time for hobby-wise.
Well, that's good because I think we're talking about lists today.
We are. I was given a homework assignment last time. Said told to get on the ball. So here I am.
Well, I've been running events at my local store, Grognard's. We've been running events every 2 weeks, and since the last podcast, I think I've had 2 events. I, unfortunately, been regulated to doing demos, so I haven't really got an actual game, so to say, in for myself. So I've been kind of introducing the game a lot to some new players in the local area that have just discovered the game. One of the guys was always interested but just never kind of dove in. So he just dove in. And, I've been just trying to get, a little crew together that, a regular crew to come to the events. And we have a pretty good turnout of different factions. So I don't think we have any duplicate factions that people are playing. Well, actually, I take that back. One, we have 2 guys that are playing Warrior Nation. But beyond that, just been kind of doing my build thing. Not much time for actually putting paint on them. Just been trying to show the game off to people.
Yeah, and shout out to Todd at Grognard's. He's done an amazing job of supporting Wild West Texas out there in your area.
Yeah, we just had recently Adepticon, and he had quite a few blisters and stuff that he ended up bringing from the store for his booth at Adepticon. And I think he was just a couple booths away from War Cradles. They were situated pretty nice that like if Daz couldn't find what somebody wanted in their booth, Grognard's was right down the way, and so people that attended Adepticon could hit both booths and walk, go home happy, getting all the plastic crack that they wanted. So you mentioned, Brian, what we're talking about today. So why don't we go right into our main topic? Today we're going to talk about Posse Building. So let's go ahead and go into our first main topic.
All right. So what we did was we had spoken to each other trying to figure out what to do next, and we decided to have a little bit of a list building challenge where we each took different types of lists and put something together. We'll talk about them, talk about how we put them together, what goes into list building, and the different kinds of lists you can have. What are the 3 types that we did? I got the easiest one, apparently, because I'm the remedial child in this group. So I got the plain old regular old theme posse. What are you working on there, Brian?
Yeah, so there are two basic types of posses that you can design. You have theme posses, like you mentioned, but then they also have, each faction has a faction posse. So it's like a standard posse that any of the bosses can take. And then, of course, theme posses are built around a boss. The design or the posse build that I'm going to be discussing a bit later is going to be a 2-boss themed posse. So it's going to be 2 bosses that also then brings several slots worth of models into a boss. So it's a 1,500 build, 2 lawman bosses, and I'll go into more details about that when we get to my turn.
And then I got the joy of doing the crazy list. And it's something that a lot of people, I think, don't realize you can do, is that you can take a posse list that's nothing but bosses. So I did the crazy one, and we'll talk about these a little bit more, as what we want to do is kind of just cover posse building. How does it work? When we were talking about this, Brian mentioned that this is actually, especially for newcomers, it's one of the most asked things of how do you do this on the forums, on Facebook. This question always pops up. Even for people that have played the game, sometimes it can be tricky. I mean, posse building, list building, it's very similar to any other game like, Warhammer or, whatever other miniature game where you're putting a list together of different types of units, and these lists have either restrictions or they may have a benefit if you put a certain unit or model in it. So it's very similar to that. It's once you kind of understand it, I think all you guys will be running with it. So let's describe basically how the posse, they actually have a diagram that you can see in the rule book of how you would fill this out. And it's basically, It looks like gun chambers. So there's slots that you would fill in with these, like I said, these certain units. But where you start with is you basically start with your boss. So whatever faction you pick, most factions have multiple bosses that you can pick from. So I got to find the picture because I'm
right.
I'm staring right at it.
Right. So the biggest change from the first version of Wild West Exodus and now the second edition with War Cradle is army building is centered around bosses narratively. So the whole concept is everything is based around the bosses, and they're likely to bring foot soldiers or faces. So it's very linked to the narration of a game. Say you're going to pick a lawman posse. First step in the build is you need to pick a boss. Then they say, hey, now you have to make a choice. You're starting with Wilder. Now what do you want to do? There are several options. The first option is pick another boss.
Which is kind of
and then pick another boss.
Is kind of what
and then
I
just
did.
Pick another boss.
Yeah, that's
you
what I
don't
did.
actually have to follow into the posse builds. But the other option is now each boss has 2 options to go into a posse build, and that's where the narration of your boss, right? You can follow his themed posse, and a themed posse is going to tell you, like Eric mentioned, in a cylinder aspect. So it's a number of 6. He can bring up to 6 different units to benefit his themed posse. That changes for every boss. Or you can go with a faction posse, which is every boss can bring that. It's the same slots for each boss. So as an example, later I'm going to be bringing Wild Bill Hickok, and his posse in my 2-boss group is going to be a themed posse. Helena Miller, who I'm bringing as the second boss in my build, she is bringing a lawman faction posse, mainly because we don't know what her themed posse looks like yet, so I was kind of limited there. But that's the choices. When you pick a boss, you have to decide, hey, am I going to go theme, which aids to the narration of what you're playing, or are you going to go with the standard? So you have more option to go anywhere with your faction build. If you go faction posse, theme posse really plays into the theme. Like Ranger Showboat for Wild Bill Hickok, pretty much bringing Rangers. And that's it. Most of the models that you're going to be able to bring, they all have to have the Ranger trait to be able to fit into the Ranger Showboat. Similar faction stuff like that is Waka Sansi's theme posse.
I'm glad you said that, not me.
Are you? Are we going to see her later too? But very much so like that. I think even Dr. Vitale, he's got a trait that has to be repeated all inside his theme posse. Same with Annabelle Hamilton. Gonna have to have Ketteret probably as one of her main traits. I know, Stonewall Jackson got to have Confederate in his theme trait.
Some of the Enlightened bosses have.
And that was the main reason there are traits attached to all the models, is it helps with that narration of Posse Building.
Yeah, I mean, some more examples, like I know Enlightened, like you mentioned, the traits. Enlightened, some of the bosses have a lot of the units that you fill these slots with have to have the creation trait. Or going back to the theme, I know a real popular theme for lawmen, like if you pick Wyatt, a favorite is the Tombstone theme, which most people are familiar with, the movie Tombstone. If you pick that as your theme posse with Wyatt, it's pretty much who you're going to take. You think of Tombstone. Who was his crew in Tombstone? Well, you're going to take, his brothers. You're going to take Doc. So these are all guys that are going to fill out that theme, that story of that point in Wyatt's, life.
Well, so why don't we go into describing the posse cards? So alongside your faction cards on the website, there's going to be a PDF file, and that PDF file is going to be your posse and armory PDF. Inside that, you will find a themed posse and a faction posse for every boss available in that faction, as well as some lawman faction posse cards for some of the models that are faces, but you can upgrade them to be what's called an underboss, and that means they can play as a boss, but they may not have their own theme posse. I think the way War Cradle kind of mentions it is they may not have their own theme posse because they plan to have some theme posses for the underboss. So further down the road, we'll see a theme posse for some of the most, notorious underbosses in the game currently. One of which is Felipe. What is that? Espinosa. Felipe Espinosa is currently a face, but you can play him upgrade him into underboss, and we already been sneak peeked his future posse build, the Bloody Espinosas. Shout out War Cradle. Awesome.
Didn't they just have some early production models at Essen?
Yes, I do believe we were teased some photos over from the UK where they did have those Bloody Espinosa models actually in 3D print, and yeah, they looked really, really cool. And it has been confirmed that the guitarist, little brother Espinosa guy, he in fact does have body parts in that guitar case that he's standing on.
Of course.
That's not a glove. That's an actual hand. And what's cool is the picture that Stuart took of those models, he actually turned them around and showed that each of them they do carry instrument. So when we saw the earlier one photo, all we saw was the front. He later took a picture. He turned them around so you could see the instruments that they each carried. For some of the models that you could tell what instrument they were in this mariachi band. But okay, you got me sidetracked. Why'd you do that?
All right.
So let's look at the cards.
Let's look at the card.
That's right. So when you look at the card, again, the aesthetics that War Cradle has put into this game is just really, really, really cool. And so when they designed these posse cards to aid in posse building, really jumps out. I mean, there are six rounds on the picture, and each round corresponds to a slot in the cylinder of a revolver. So corresponding slots and rounds on the side of the shell casing, you will see what option you can do for that slot. So for the Lawman faction posse, the first option is up to 2 Lawman face units. So what that means is you can bring 1 unit of hands or faces. They're typically faces is one model, but there are some faces in the game where you can take multiples. So it's basically letting you know that you can bring up to 2 different face units. However many models that may be, but it gives you an option of 2. You don't have to bring 2, but if there are 2 faces your Lawman boss want to bring, you can bring both of them in that one slot.
Right.
Then you go to the next slot. And
that's also important to note, Brian, that in that case, we're filling slots, not units. You don't necessarily have 1 unit per slot.
Exactly.
So you can build out into a larger force than you might initially think.
Exactly, and you have to pay attention to the and/or, and they really get to that further in. Like the second slot in this faction build is a Lawman face unit and/or a Lawman hands or Lawman support unit. So that's very important because the Lawman faction is very face heavy. So they really encourage you to bring these notable heroes in the Lawman faction. So you're pushed to bring as many of these named people as you can because that's their niche in the game. So right off the bat, you're bringing 2 faces if you want. Then the second slot, you're bringing another face, and if you want, bring in some hands, right? Or a support unit, which means you can bring in a vehicle. And that's just 2 slots in. Then in the third slot, they do it again, say, hey, bring another face unit and or a hands unit or support unit. And it keeps adding that and or. It really does give you a lot of options as you build your posse, so you can really bring a lot of models, or you can stay, short and trim with just faces throughout this build.
So you basically, what they're going to do is they're going to look at all these slots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and one at a time, basically fill them. So you fill 1, and then you can move to 2. You fill 2. So you go in order. So it's good to note that when you're building your list, you don't have to go in order if you kind of have an idea which slot you want to do. But where it comes into play is, for example, if you're doing a theme posse, a lot of the theme posses have some kind of bonus that if you fill all the slots, you get some kind of special ability. For example, I'm looking at the No Surrender theme posse for the Union in the book. And what it says, bonus, a Union charge sergeant may be included for free for every 3 Union hands units at maximum unit size present in the posse. So they're saying if you fill those slots, you get this bonus of taking the sergeant for free.
Right. And just to clarify something you said there, I do believe, if you want to get to a certain slot, you do have to fill the slots ahead of it.
Yes,
you can't skip around. So that is what keeps things somewhat structured. Is if you want to get to the character or the unit that is available in slot number 3, you have to fill up slots numbers 1 and 2 before you can get to that third one. So you can't skip around. You want to get to 6, you've got to fill up the entire posse.
Yes.
Right. It's also a way of balancing. Some builds obviously are going to be more deadly, so the only way to limit that is to reserve some of the faction models that are so much more deadly, like the heavy vehicles, a lot of the other support vehicles. You have to wait deeper into your build to be able to get them, so you don't right off the bat bring one boss and a super model in the first slot, and then you don't even have to invest in the rest of that build. That's one of the ways they offset that, is like they definitely want you to follow that general theme before you get all the good goodies. So another thing to consider with the bonuses that some of these posse builds have is typically your faction posse is not going to have a theme bonus. Those are really only reserved for the theme builds. But one thing to note, some themed posse builds get the bonus regardless of how full that build is. So like with the no surrender build, you don't have to have all 6 slots full to get that bonus. You just have to have those 3 sets of full hand units, which means 6 models in each one of those units. With the Ranger Showboat, it says all 6 slots are filled with at least 1 unit. Then all the units in the posse gain the elite rule. There are some posse builds that are saying, they say all models in this build get this. So you really do need to read the card to make sure you're not forgetting the bonus that you may be getting just for bringing that theme.
Yeah,
and
go ahead, Tom.
No, I was going to say, and some of the bonuses are really significant, so choose wisely.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like how they're very clear and cut with what you need to build the posses out, and the bonuses too. So it kind of, when you pick the theme posses and you see a really cool bonus, it really encourages you to fill out those slots as much as you can. A lot of times when I'm doing posse building for Enlightened, and they have the and or, a lot of times it's like you gotta weigh in, okay, do I want to put this face and or, a unit of maybe say 3 of my constructs, just some little guys just to fill that slot out. And then I can move to the next slot, say slot 3. And then it has, again, face and or support. Well, maybe this one I'm kind of running short on points because we're doing, a 1,500 point game, and I really want to get to that slot 6 so I can take a Doomsday. So maybe I'm just going to take the support unit and kind of push the face off for maybe a later slot if points-wise I can make it work. So a lot of times when you're building, it's one of those brain burners where you got steam coming out of your ears and you're starting to do that number crunching thing that, just like any other game, when you're doing a list build, you're playing with those numbers and you're weighing, okay, this unit's going to bring this, but he costs this many points. Oh, he's a little expensive. Let's see what my other options are for this slot. What other unit has these kind of keywords that may be a little bit cheaper that he will fit in that slot to get me to slot 4, 5, and 6 eventually.
Right. And another thing to consider is outlaws. Outlaws are a little bit different. So many of the outlaw bosses, theme posses and faction posses, they're going to hint to you which other factions you can add them to. So you would have to definitely check the cards for each of the bosses to give you a hint as who else you can have them join your faction. So say Jesse James, Honor Among Themes posse, he can join Enlightened armies. He can join Hex armies, and of course Outlaws. But on the flip side, the Regulators theme posse with Billy the Kid, he can do Lawman, Union, Enlightened. So each boss with their theme posse might have other options you can do. That way you can bring additional bosses outside of the regular faction. So if you're doing Enlightened and you want to bring, you have some outlaw models, you can bring an outlaw boss and some of your outlaw models into your Enlightened posse. The only limitation is you have to have more main faction bosses in your posse than outlaw mercenary bosses. So if you're an Enlightened, player, you have to have at least 1-for-1 or more of your faction of Enlightened to bring another. So you couldn't bring, as an Enlightened build, you couldn't bring 3 Enlightened bosses and 4 outlaw bosses. You would technically then have to not bring that last outlaw boss and keep it at 3 and 3.
I might have something to say about that. That build.
You may dive into that a little later.
Yeah, I'll dive into that a little bit. So on that note, why don't we get into kind of our all our homework assignments that we did. where the three of us basically came up with a posse build for examples for everybody based on the different types of builds that you could do. We mentioned earlier that one of us took a theme posse build, another one of us took the two boss posse build, and then I did a crazy all boss posse build. So why don't we go ahead and start with that. Tom, you had the first one, so you did a theme posse build. So why don't you go ahead and run down for everybody what you built.
All right. So with the theme posse build that I did, I think I mentioned on the first episode how I was intrigued with the idea of a cavalry build. So that naturally guided me towards the Union, and who else are you going to use to lead the Union cavalry but Custer? So I went with the Forlorn Hope theme posse. Read this out for you. In a Union force, instead of a faction posse, Armstrong Custer may take this theme posse. Custer gains the largest common rule. If all 6 slots are filled with at least one unit in the posse, then all units in the posse gain the Trailfinder special rule. Armstrong Custer is the only unit with the boss trait permitted in this posse. So a couple things there to note right off the bat. Custer gets the largest common rule, regardless of how much of the posse you fill out, and that allows him to share out his large amount of fate that he gets. So he doesn't have that naturally, so he can just hand that out now. And the Trailfinder special rule is really neat. After everyone deploys, every unit that has Trailfinder gets to move up to their full walking distance. So for most regular infantry, that's usually up to 5 inches. And for the cavalry that I'll be using, that's up to 8 inches. So that's really, really big, especially if you have to capture ground or get anywhere. If you happen to be playing an adventure where you need to go and capture an objective, push something, you're really just pushing way out into the board to start with. This is kind of an interesting posse because it is all hands units. Every single slot is hands units. Actually kind of challenging to build, much more so than I expected. I started this out going, okay, let me see what my restrictions are. So in the Union, Iron Horses count as hands units, not support units. So I was able to go through there and assign Iron Horse units to every slot. So I started out doing that, and the minimum size for one of those units is 2, maximum size is 6. To begin with, I assigned 2 to every slot. So I started off with 12 Iron Horses, and I started outfitting them and playing with numbers. And, I was talking to Brian and Eric about it, and Brian pointed out, he goes, you might want some infantry in there and not just all cavalry in case you have to hold a building or get into some messy terrain situations. And I said, that's probably not a bad idea. So I went.
It also helps the pocketbook.
Yes, it helps it a lot. Because this is not a cheap posse to run. So I went back and I refigured everything. And so what I did is I started out with my boss slot is Custer, mounted for 295 points. Then I went from there. I figured what size units do I want for infantry? I like to bring a 5-man unit. I don't know why. I've just always felt kind of gotten used to that. Maybe that's all my Warhammer days where that was your squad size. So I took 2 different 5-man units of infantry. So I've got, 5 Union riflemen, and I have another unit of 5 Union, what are they? The close combat ones. So there's my number 1 and my number 2. The riflemen have a rocket pod attached to it, and the skirmishers have a Gatling gun attached to it. So the idea there is that they can hold ground, they can hold buildings, they can slowly advance up behind the rest of the cavalry that's involved. So going into the rest of the slots then, I picked up Iron Horses, obviously across all of them. I've got 5 Gatling gun Iron Horses in slot number 3. And then I have 2 each for each of the remaining slots. I've got 2 electro carbine ones, so that allows me to apply the stun condition. I've got 2 flamethrower iron horses that lets me put out the hazard condition, which if you are paying attention to how that works, you also have if you apply a second one, it turns into a lethal condition. And then for the final one, I have 2 iron horses with grenade launchers. That lets you put out some blast templates. And so basically kind of covers the gamut of what types of damage I can push out there. Really what this allows you to do is gives a lot of flexibility as far as movement is concerned. Iron horses move up to 8 inches, so they cover the board really, really quickly. They've got some special rules that make them harder to hit if you move more than 7 inches. They have the skirmisher rules so that they have 4-inch cohesion, so they can spread out a little bit more. And the whole idea, in my mind, is to really aggressively push objectives and then march in with the units of infantry behind them to hold objectives. What do you guys think of this? What do you think about the idea of how I went looking at this to originally build it, the way we talked about it a little bit to refine it? Thoughts?
Oh, I think it's great. I especially like how you split up the different armaments, and definitely the flamethrowers are going to be your anti-building. If you got hands that hole up in a building, the engulf rules on a torrent template for like flamethrowers are definitely going to benefit using those against those hand units or face units hiding in buildings, because all you got to do is touch that template onto the building and everybody inside is going to get hit by that torrent. So definitely a good idea to have those. The anti-hands weapons with the grenade launchers, the blast templates, and then the Gatlins for taking on a face unit or boss units. I think having that variety of spread on your cavalry is definitely a positive, as well as, again, you don't want to be on all vehicle list and show up to the table and there's no room to move your big models through the gaps in the building, and so you're stuck being out in the open, and it'll be a bad day for you.
Yeah. Well, one of the fun things with the iron horses that I was looking at, because you have to move 7 inches if you want to get, I forget the name of the rule offhand, but where you get to make them retake the aim roll. I know what it does. I just can't remember what the name of it is. It is. I have it right here.
Moving target.
Moving target. Yeah, you think I would remember that one?
Well, in your defense, it does exactly describe what you're talking about in the title. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, come on, it's after midnight. Give me a break here. But the way you're allowed to move, you can pivot on the center of your base and continue your movement. So I was thinking about how would I deal with this if I don't really want to go anywhere, but want to get the bonus. And it occurred to me that you could basically just kind of do some donuts and just basically spin some donuts on these things and get your moving target bonus. So I see some of that in my future.
Yeah, the 1-inch donut.
That's it. It'll be donut holes, but it'll work.
So you'll definitely have to mount some of your iron horses in a skid out like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this list kind of scares me a little bit, Tom, to tell you the truth. With all those iron horses zooming around, I think the only way I want to face you is on a full board where there's lots of buildings and brush to slow you down.
And that's what all the special weapons are for, is to deal with the buildings, the brush, things that can get in the way. It's cheaper just take a whole bunch of Gatling guns, but a terrain heavy board really limits the effectiveness of this list, and so it had to have a little bit of infantry there, but iron horses still aren't very big. You can still get them into a lot of places, and just the idea with them is you got to keep moving. There's 12 iron horses in there if you count Custer. So, you have a dozen iron horses, you got, 10 infantry backing them up. that's a fairly, for 1,500 points, yeah, it's 22 models, but that's the effectiveness is going to go down very quickly as you start losing those. And so you just got to really keep everything moving, make them hard to hit, try to keep them behind cover as they're moving.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. There's a lot to it, but I think it also gives a lot of tactical flexibility as far as pushing objectives and getting where you need to be quickly, and really bringing a lot of firepower to bear.
I definitely think it would be a fun list to play with, because it just, like you said, it's a fast moving list, and fast moving units are always fun to play, because you kind of never know with their speed and their length that they're moving. It kind of keeps your opponent off balance, that they won't quite know for sure where you're going to be going.
Yep. And I mean, you're 8 inches to begin with. You can really, if you dash with them, you can really get these things going pretty quick. So,
yeah.
You can cover. You're only playing on a 3-foot board, generally speaking. You're really covering a lot of ground.
Yes, for sure.
Right. Actually, for that build, at 1,500, you may want to play on 4x4, just so you have a little more room. But I agree. I think I wouldn't want to face that list. But so it would definitely be fun if presented with it.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And so if all of our listeners each buy 1 Iron Horse and mail it to me, we can make this thing a reality.
Stranger things have happened.
Really, that would be too many, because we had more than 12 listeners.
Wow. I stand by what I said.
Right, you can send me any overflow, so I can do the list too.
All right, Brian, you did our 2-boss list, so do you want to cover your list build there?
Sure, following the union actually works for me. So I did a lawman theme. I don't think anyone who knows me is going to be shocked by that. So I started with Helena Miller. Those of you who may not know who she is the boss of the Infernal Investigations posse that is soon to be released. That's a Stewart soon, so it could be months away. So there's a few hardcore lawman loyalists who wish it to be sooner. So Helena Miller, she's the boss of the Infernal Investigations unit, and she currently does not have a themed posse out. They haven't teased us with it yet. So in the current card set of 1.07, they added the cards for the models in the Infernal Investigations, but not the posse card. So I'm just using a lawman faction posse for her. So at 225, she brings her 4 fortune, which is great. That's a pretty good boon for most bosses. And the first slot in the posse build is up to 2 lawman face units. So right off the bat, I'm bringing in, no shock here, Jedrick Powell. Those of you who like to listen to me babble know who that is. So that model is one of the 2 faces that I'm bringing. The second one is Furio Montoya. That brings off the bat 2 hand-to-hand specialists into the game pretty quick. With Jedrick Powell, he also has Gunfighter. He's got a few other neat little tricks up his sleeve. Furio, she's a combat master. She also has For the Boys, so she's going to get a little boost being around Jedrick. So they're going to be a deadly duo. Then in slot 2, I'm able to bring in a face and or lawman hand or a lawman support unit. So that allows me to bring in Blackhoof 2020, Jedrick's sidekick support model. He's the Blackhoof that survived the Union versus the Rebel Civil War and has gained sentience enough to be an actual go-to, officer inside the Internal Affairs Investigation Posse. So that is the core of Helena Miller's part of this 2-boss faction build. I then switch over to Wild Bill Hickok, and he, of course, is bringing the Ranger Showboat theme. This theme is going to be Ranger heavy. So right off the bat, we're going to go with Wild Bill and his units. They're going to have 3 fortune to share. First slot says Grace Myrtle or Lawman Hands unit with the Ranger trait. And I'm just going to bring Grace Myrtle for 130 points. She's definitely a follow-up. She's got some good pistols. She's got the chase rifle. She's also got a lasso with drag. Very much a good add to this group. Brings a little bit of fortune of her own. The second slot in this group, I'm bringing some Ranger Minutemen. These are the Rangers with rifles, and as part of an upgrade for that unit, I'm bringing 5 Ranger Minutemen. That 5th one is going to have a sniper rifle. Then the slot 3, I'm bringing the Veteran Rangers. These are the short, close combat Rangers with pistols. I'm also bringing 5 of those guys. That 5th one is going to be carrying a Gatlin. So, and that rounds up. That comes right to a full 1,500 army build with 2 bosses. Some of the neat tricks to this build is I'm going to have 3 lassos in this. So I'm going to be able to do some tangles. I'm going to do some drags. With the Helena Miller, she's got flight. She's got treasure hunter. She's got tactical brilliance, which gives some reserve checks if I wanted to leave any of these models in reserve. Got a lot of iron ass up in here. Furio's bringing some decapitate with her sabers. I've got Jedrick also is going to have electro batons, so if he can bring some stun along into the game. Also with another lasso there. His pistols are rail pistols, so bring in some crits with some shred. They also have a range of 15, which is balls crazy good for pistols. So a lot of neat things. He also brings to the table shrewd strategist. Once per turn, he may spend an action point to look at the top card from either the adventure deck or the action deck. And if I don't like that card, I can discard it. So also some pretty neat tricks in this posse.
You got so many lassos in that posse build there, you could have your own rodeo.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, a lot of neat tricks. Definitely going to be neat. I think. I can't wait to get these models in the Infernal Posse because more than likely I'll be playing some of these models all the time.
Which ones would those be?
Jedrick Powell, yeah, I think he goes by Jed for short. Yeah, I think he's a definite go-to. One of the neat things on this model is he's an underboss, so I can actually bring him as a boss. So that'll be interesting to try to put that together in the future and stuff as well. And of course, Blackhoof 2020. He's got Forceful Strike, he's got a couple of Hammer Hands, Hyper V rifle with shred, and crits with lethal, and piercing 3. That's just going to be a nasty little add to this group here. Definitely, these models are great. Looking at the cards, I'm like, they're crazy awesome. They have tons of common rules and special rules each, and it's going to be awesome. This is going to be a posse that you're going to have trouble keeping track of all the extra things they can do.
Yeah.
They're going to be able to have so many options and so many things that they can bring to the table.
They cover a lot of bases, basically.
Oh, definitely. So it's going to be intriguing. And, of course, the theme is just right up my alley. Investigating all the nasty tidbits in the world, Wild West Exodus. It's just pretty neat. So I'm eager to try this out. I'll be proxying obviously the Infernal investigation models until that posse comes out, but definitely want to give this a try. And again, there's so many options and things that we can do with the way that the posse build system works. And this is just one example of that. 2 bosses went 3 deep in each of the posse builds. And doing so, I didn't get the special ability filling one boss's theme out completely, but look at all the variety of things that we'll be able to do. With one group of 4 models having access to 4+ just for that group, and then the Ranger Hands unit and Grace having access to, another set of fortune from Wild Bill. In total, that's 7 fortune, not counting Furio's carrying one of her own. Jedric's carrying one of his own. Blackhoof 2020 is even carrying one of his own. And Grace is carrying one of her own. So lots of fortune in this group, which Lawman's not known for having a bunch. So this definitely gets you plenty of re-rolls and emergency assistance with those fortunes. I think it's going to be a great pop. What do you guys think?
Well, I think what really stands out to me, especially after having just gone over mine, which was all very hands heavy, where yours is very character heavy, between the bosses and the faces, the variety of things that you can do, the tricks you can pull out really stand out to me versus I have a bunch of guys and they all kind of do the same thing. That really stands out to me. It seems like it'll make it a very flexible posse.
No, yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
Well, like you said, it's the kind of posse that you have a lot of your little tricks that you're bringing, and it will be some work to keep track of it all, but that's why we play the same posses over and over and over again, and eventually you get to know it like the back of your hand.
Yeah, nothing worse than, two rounds later going, hey, wait a minute, I could have done that. I was playing with my son the other day trying to teach him the new system, and, totally didn't dawn on me when his attack dogs were, chewing up Slain. Slain has a saber with parry. I was like, oh, dude, I may have survived that onslaught if I'd have remembered, hey, I could have parried one of those.
Well, all right, on to my list, I guess. You guys both did a lot of your guys bring options to the table. So my posse build that I did is I did an all boss list, which I have yet to see on the table or anybody actually play with one, but we have heard of people doing this. So what I ended up doing is, so I started with, like many posse builds, I started with my faction that I wanted to do. So I started with the Enlightened, and my go-to with the Enlightened is always Dr. Carpathian. He's where I started. I just went with his basic model. I was tempted to go with Legendary, but with the points build that the three of us were doing, I knew doing an all-boss list that it was going to go up very, very fast. So I chose to stick with his basic. He does come with 4 fortune. He's 250 just for his basic, where his legendary was like just over 50 points more. And with us trying to stay in the average 1,500 point list, like I said, it was going to fill up fast. So Dr. C is bringing his 4 fortune. And then for the second boss, I went with another Enlightened. I figured let's just do it systematically, pick my 2 Enlightened bosses, and then go with one from another faction. So for my second boss, I went with Annabelle Hamilton. So one of the things that I was looking at with her is, something different. She's kind of one of the newer characters that are out there that we have yet to see a model. So I kind of was looking over her stuff, and I'm like, well, she brings, Carpathian that many of the Enlightened are known for. But one of the things that I also liked is she has portal mastery, so she can manipulate the portals. And being one of her keywords is Confederate, and what I ended up doing for the rest of the build is I was looking at outlaws, which outlaws can go just about anywhere. For an all-boss list, I figured that would have been the best fit with Enlightened. Plenty of choices. And what I liked about Annabelle is that she has that Confederate, so I'm looking at her Rebel Yell. The thing behind the Rebel Yell is that it's a special combat action that once this action has been made by this unit, any other units with both the human and Confederate traits gain a +1 to their limit attribute for the duration of this turn while within 8 inches of her. So it does say, though, it does not stack with any other limit bonuses. So my whole idea was I was going to fill out this posse with other bosses that had a Confederate. So after Hamilton, I decided to go for the outlaw bosses. And so for slot number, let's see, Dr. C was my main boss. Hamilton was slot 1. So for slot 2, I chose who else?
There's no slots.
I was just thinking that.
It's
Like,
true.
there's no slots.
So let me
So it's slots.
rewind a little bit. So after Annabelle, I went with none other than Jesse James for the outlaw. And what I did actually, so Jesse James is also bringing the Confederate. So he's going to benefit from Hamilton, Rebel Yell, but he also has Rebel Yell. So he can use it to give other people, more actions that they can take.
You separate them. You now can extend that 16 inches.
Yes.
With the two of them. So that's actually pretty good.
So I can kind of start this little chain effect with these guys. So with Jesse, I picked his mounted so I could give him a little bit more speed. He can zoom around. Let's see. So Jesse his mounted is 260, and he's bringing 3 fortune that he can use. After him, I went with Quantrill, who's also a mounted boss, and he also has the Confederate special ability. He's at 240 with 3 fortune. So what I did here, I took 2 enlightened bosses, and then I just took 2 outlaw bosses. So I'm basically even 2 and 2. So if I want to take more outlaws, I have to go back to the enlightened. So what I ended up doing, once again, I'm kind of playing with the points game. My points are starting to fill up pretty quick at this point with all these guys over 200 points. They're pushing 2.5. I went with Cam for the Enlightened. So now Cam is one of the cheaper bosses in the Enlightened. He's at 220, if that sounds cheap, but it actually is. Yeah. And he's bringing 2 fortunes. So what I liked about Cam is he has some tricks where he can make a special move action where he flies. So he can get pretty far into the board fast and just drop down on somebody. So I thought he'd be a good addition to it. And he helps me with the points game that I'm playing. So after that, I went with a outlaw boss. And actually what I did is I went with somebody that's a mercenary boss. So I went with Marcus Wayward, who I also took mounted. And Marcus has the Confederate special rule also. I basically have, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 guys in this boss list that have the Rebel Yell special ability. So all of them can kind of chain off of each other. And then 3 of them are mounted. I figured it gives me some speed. I'm not used to speed like that with the Enlightened, so it's something fun to try out. Unfortunately, I couldn't take any more because at this point, Marcus is 250 with 4 fortune. Actually, I take that back. He's mounted, so he's 275. And I'm coming in at 1,475 points of our 1,500 build. So I could probably squeeze in another one there, but it's going to be kind of close. So I ended up stopping at taking the 6 bosses for my list.
Right, because then you'd have to pick up some sort of piece of filler.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah, and we wanted to keep it, for this list being all bosses, I had to kind of stop while I was ahead. So overall, I'm looking at across the board 19 fortune that I can mess around with. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the neat things about Wild West X's is, scalability. There's a lot of people who don't want a lot of units because it causes the game to go time-wise into a long game. So a 1,500 game, especially with the lists like I built and the list that Tom built, you're talking a long game. It's going to be a couple hours. When you're playing 6 models versus 6 models, an all boss versus all boss, that game is going to be fast. You're going to play that on a 3x3. You could probably even reduce it to a 2x2, and it's going to be fast. It's going to be bloody. All the models on the table use their own fortune. They all have tons of special abilities, really gross, deadly weapons. it's just going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what worries me about when I look at a list like that is it seems like you could focus fire down a boss a turn or so with a larger force, because you don't have all those smaller units that can take the hits for you.
Yeah.
So that would be my biggest concern playing that type of a list.
And that's actually with one of the things that Dr. Carpathian needs is he needs his little drones to basically stand in front of him and, use as meat shields basically and take hits, and then when they go down he can bring them back up. So he's not really benefiting from that trick, not having all these nameless guys with him. But like I said, he's kind of my go-to with the Enlightened. I don't know, it's something about his backstory and everything that he's always in a lot of my list. But like you're saying, Tom, one of the reasons that I picked mounted units for Jesse, Quantrell already comes mounted, but having Jesse mounted and Marcus mounted, something that I hope to kind of, with them being a little bit zippier around the board, maybe it will help their survivability when facing, a posse that has a lot of dudes in it where they're going to be focusing fire on them.
Right.
I'm interested to try it out and see what happens. So,
it would be really interesting because you do have all that fortune to help counter that, to keep them alive. I'm curious to see if the obscene amount of fortune you have counters the lack of numbers.
Yeah, I think what I would do is a list like this is try not to get them where they get separated too much. I think any of these guys, if they find themselves, hung out to dry by themselves and they get focused fire on them, they're going to go down. Because there's, even with, a lot of fortune, there's only so many hits, or, you can only do quick and the dead once per round. So, eventually, if they get ganged up on, they're going to go down.
Right. Your luck does run out sooner or later.
Yeah. One of the things I would suggest is look at maybe bringing Augusta instead of Burson, Carpathian.
I was thinking about with her.
Because you have two Carpathian, but you have no constructs.
Yeah.
So if you switch one of the two out with Augusta, you bring the ability to bring her back.
Yeah.
Right? If she goes down. And she has sawbones.
That's true.
So anyone she's within 3 inches gains tough.
Probably what I would do is swap out maybe Cam. I'd have to
you'd have to look at the numbers to make sure you had enough points. But swapping someone out to bring Augusta gives you the ability, one, bringing her back with Carpathian. If you switch out Cam, you lose the flexibility of having the flight.
Yeah.
But that does leave you with Carpathian having the ability to do Dark Council, which, the compelling is very useful, especially for all these low mind characters.
Well, yeah, that, and one of the things I always liked about him is that when he does a focus action, he doesn't get the normal +2, he gets +3. So it's almost like a guarantee that he's going to hit what he's shooting at type thing.
Right. The only downside is they made his super gross weapon a torrent.
Yeah.
You gotta risk him now.
Yeah.
Before, ranged, and he can blast you from anywhere.
Yeah, he definitely has to get stuck in there.
Which he's 6 for fight or 6 for shoot. He's pretty even across the board with what he can do. So,
yep.
That's one of the downsides to most of the factions is they have some really great options for bosses, which this is why I go for theme. Then you're not really concerned about what boss you're bringing because you're playing a narrative game. You're going to bring what works.
Right. Yeah. I definitely found it difficult going through this exercise, trying to limit myself. I found myself trying to pull in 3 different bosses, and I was like, oh my God, I'm up at 3,000 points. And
That's going to be a long game.
yeah. Went a little overboard having to scale all that back.
Well, one of the things I do when I posse build, I actually have a notebook, and a lot of times, I kind of get an idea for, hey, let's try doing something with this unit and this unit. So I'll take the notebook and I'll write down the boss, and then I got I write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it's like brainstorming. I'll just write down some list where I just fill these slots with the units based on either a themed or a lot of times when I'm doing these builds, I'm just kind of doing your faction build, your kind of generic posse build. So eventually, I got a bunch that I can look through and say, oh, what do I want to run today? Oh, let's try this one that I thought up a couple weeks ago. So, I mean, it's kind of a good practice to get into doing stuff like that, because you can try out these different builds that you do, and then maybe make a note after you play it that this unit worked well with this face, and you'll remember next time if you do a posse build, you'll be like, oh, hey, those two guys worked pretty good together, so let's bring those into this. One guy's a face, so I know he'll fill this slot easy enough, and this guy is, the support unit worked good with them, so I'll put this in this slot. It's a good habit, maybe a good practice to try out.
Well, it gets you exposed to a lot of the different units that are out there as well. Try to figure out, what they do, what you like as you develop your play style.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite units that I pretty much include in every single Enlightened build that I do is Creation 7. It's not so much what he does well, what he doesn't do well. It's just he's kind of intimidating on the board. You see this big old model with 4 arms. Yeah, he does have some kind of neat things that he does, though, so I admit that. But you'll eventually, when you try out all these different models and what they can do and stuff, you'll find favorite models that you really just enjoy playing. Not so much because of that they're really good models, they have good stats or good weapons, but they're just fun to play.
Yep, and I always find there's always that one model too that for whatever reason he's like lucky. Just there's always some dopey model that every time you put it on the board, it does work for you, regardless of what it is. And I find that I fall in love with pieces that way.
It's probably why I take 7 all the time. Well, all right. Well, that kind of does our little segment for posse building and how it works, and we had some fun with each other making our little homework assignments. I think everybody passed with A's.
Yes. I admit I cheated a little bit when you guys when I was like, hey guys, what do you think of this? You guys were like, you might want to take some guys with that, not just all
right.
whites.
And that's a good thing to bring up. Definitely discuss your ideas and posse builds amongst yourselves at the forum, at Facebook, with your buddies. Only in that open Discord while you're talking about what your plan is are you going to really be able to fine-tune, tweak out different things. I mean, that's one of the main reasons we're doing the podcast is that dialogue, that chatting, that sharing of ideas actually helps everyone in the game. It helps everyone find new ways to do things. It helps clarify rules. It helps you find that model that you really need. It helps you tweak out things and makes everything better. So definitely, hey, add in comments. We want to see your list. Let's see what your ideas are. If you have any questions or if you had any suggestions on tweaking these 3 lists that we talked to about today, or share where have you gone crazy, especially if you've done these type of lists. What did you do? Who'd you bring? Let's share.
You know, where do you make sacrifices? Because we're all restricted in our points, and we all want to bring things, and you definitely have to make some hard decisions. I'd like to hear, thought processes behind how are you making those decisions? How are you deciding what gets left on the cutting room floor?
I'll admit, Tom, some of my feedback for your posse build was because it just scared the hell out of me.
Well, I've been intrigued with that idea. As soon as it was, I got the theme posse. I'm like, I know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, do we need to start a support group for opponents of Custer theme lists?
Yeah.
Well, believe me,
I will admit, I played a custard theme list, and I built a 1,500 custard list. Showed up to play some Wild West Exodus, and the opponent I'm playing, he's like, "Well, I only have 800 points worth of watchers." I'm like, "Okay, well, let me roll back my custard theme list to 800." And let's just say he was scared of the 8 fortune, at the point where I risked custard to grab an easy 1 victory point for putting my boss in the middle of the board. Was a mistake, because he came at me hard with magenta, and that 8 fortune did not succeed. I rolled 1, 2, 1s. Literally in this onslaught from him, it went 1, 1, 1. I'm like, what? Come on! And I died with like 4 fortunes still in my on my card, which I couldn't use because I rolled 1s. You can't re-roll those, so it was rough.
Well, believe me, I was trying to figure out how to fit a Willa Shaw list in there with the Custer list, and
yeah. That's when I got scared.
But the points just weren't there.
That's the fun part about posse building, is sometimes is that number crunching and seeing how far you can push the list and how far you could add different faces and units and stuff to fill out that whether it's a theme posse or a faction posse or just a crazy build like mine where you just kind of like throw everything in the pot.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys, that's it for our little posse building segment. Stay tuned. We'll have some more stuff for you guys in this episode, including maybe some news and some stuff that's coming down the pipeline. Stay tuned.
Here, I'll open for you. Hey, Eric, how about we get some new news?
New news.
New news. All
Don't
right.
give us old news. We want new news.
Hey guys, we got some new news for you. We got some fresh stuff coming down the pipeline, and before we get to some of the new items we got coming out from War Cradle and for Wild West Exodus, let's go ahead and go over some of the, we got some appearance dates coming up that they are going to be hitting up with their booth, giving demos and selling product. So one of the first dates we got coming up is the next one is going to be the UK Games Expo. That's going to be June 1st. Go ahead and check them out there. They're probably going to be announcing some new stuff. And while you're there, go ahead and check out, they have a con exclusive figure that's for their con season throughout the summer that is only available during conventions, whether it's at the actual booth that you're attending, you can pick it up there, or you can go ahead and go on the website and order it only during these cons. So like if the con runs Friday through Sunday, the model's only going to be available online to order. And that model is Nakano Gozen. How'd I do, Brian?
Pretty good. The emissary of the Blazing Sun Empire, right?
And she's...
They were for a short term called the Celestials, but with the dystopian age modifications to the fluff, it's the Blazing Sun Empire.
Okay. And if I remember right, I was checking out her stat card, which is on the website already. She is primarily an outlaw, but if I remember right, she does work with the lawmen. So you can add her in either one of those. She is a face, and her stats are pretty cool, checking her out. So once again, the next time she's going to be available is at the UK Games Expo, whether you go to it or go online and you can order her. After the UK Games Expo, there is a couple Trailblazers. The next Trailblazers that I saw on their schedule is at the Slice and Dice, and that's in Bolton, UK on June 9th. Big Orbit Games, so they're going to be out there showing off the game on June 10th, so that's the next day, in Mister, UK. You can go there, get a quick demo. They'll show you how the game works. After those little road trips, they are coming back to the States for Gen Con. And Gen Con is in Indianapolis, Indiana, and that runs from August 2nd to the 5th. And there are rumors that I either read or heard somewhere that there possibly could be Wild West Exodus events at Gen Con. So if you're going to Gen Con, be sure to check them out there. Once again, you can look for that exclusive con figure. And then they're going to pretty much round out the con season at Tabletop Gaming Live, which is September 29th through the 30th. And I'm sure there's going to be more Trailblazers in there. I wish we could get some Trailblazer tours over here in the U.S.
I think the plan is once they get they're in the process of hiring a North American sales team, and once that happens, I believe one of their responsibilities is attending events and stuff. So they may be able to build some type of Trailblazer here in the U.S. They just have to get their infrastructure built up.
And it's probably a harder thing to do here in the U.S., just where they're doing it in the U.K. It's a little bit easier to go by, car, truck, whatever they take with them to get from store to store to do that little Trailblazer there. Whereas here, that drive would probably be significantly longer. But it'd be cool.
It'd be great, but that drive would probably be a flight over here.
Yeah, be a little bit easier. We got lots of picket fences, put it that way here.
Yeah.
So since last we spoke, we had a couple of new posses get filtered out through the Q&A. First part of May, we had the first posse they teased was the Tainted Biology Posse. Now, we saw the posse card for Dr. Bytel's themed posse in previous versions of the card in the posse rules. So it was really cool to actually see who was going to be in his posse set. So you'll get a new Dr. Bytel. I'm not sure if it's going to be a new sculpt or not. He looks like the same pose. But in his posse, you're going to get two, drumroll, hex dogs. So these are hex beasts, but they're actually, tainted, evolved hex animals. So Dr. Bytel has been fooling around with biology a little bit, and he's created these hex dogs. So they're really cool looking with all the boils and stuff. So you'll get two of them in that posse set. Hopefully we'll see them come out separately so you can get more than just the two. And we don't have stats on those yet. They haven't put those cards up in any of the rules anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see what those come out as, like what game effects they'll have.
Well, I'm assuming if they're going to be like any of the canine units that we have where you could run, up to what was the minimum number, like 2 to 6.
Right.
They're more than likely going to release them as like a 2-in-1 type of release like they did with the attack dogs.
Right. That's the hope, especially if you're going to be playing the hex, you're going to probably want more of those, even not just for his posse, but for some of the other hex posses as well. A new sculpt that's actually going to be in there that Stuart talked about was actually the original pose this model was supposed to have way back in Kickstarter 1, and it's Marcus Cunningham. So Marcus Cunningham is, a warrior nation brave that kind of got a little too tainted and can't transform back to his human self. So he's kind of like got his spirit animal markings with the rhino horn and scaly hide. And he got that huge hammer. But now his new pose for this box set was actually the original pose that they had changed when they went into production. So it'll be neat to see a new pose for him. So there's a new guy, so new model completely, that they introduced, that he has, pretty cool pose, and his jacket's open, and in his chest is a humanoid, like basically crawling out of this dude's chest. So he's just a really creepy cool, especially for, a hex thing. For this guy, he's basically got his attached twin riding on his chest. It's just really weird. One of the other models, the new models, this model we've been talking about or hinted at, begging since the last community model voting back under Outlaw. Do you remember, Tom? Do you remember what model won the voting?
God, no, I don't remember that.
So the big push was for a slick snake oil salesman.
Oh, yeah.
Throw bottles of liquid goo or whatever as part of his attack. So this new model is a snake oil salesman. Now, someone who was with us at Adepticon really loved that idea, and they must have really got a push from him for this snake oil guy, because this guy looks like Darren. And they even put a leg brace on him because he got hurt again at
Adepticon.
So he's got the big beard from that he had when he was hanging out with us. So yeah, that's going to be cool to have a little miniature Darren.
That's awesome.
Hopefully, they don't jinx it and everyone open their box of tainted biology and the actual mold has a bubble in the leg or something, further gimping
the legs just fall off.
Oh man, that's fun.
But I'm excited about that. That's going to be cool. So that was the tainted biology posse preview as part of this past Q&A. Then they went on to another one that they teased about, and they've talked about Ponce de Leon getting his own posse box. So it wasn't a complete shock to see this be a teased posse. But part of this new posse box, you'll of course get Ponce de Leon, but then you also get the Conquistador with the rocket launcher that was the heavy weapon guy. Of course, in 2.0 Wild West Exodus, all the conquistadors actually became named people. Just because of the fluff, there is a finite number of conquistadors. So there's not a whole lot of extra people in the conquistador group. It's a finite number of people because they step through a portal. So they can't re-up anyone or recruit new people because they're all Spaniards from, centuries earlier. So each of these models in the conquistador set got names. So luckily we have 3 mounted, named unique players that we get to use instead of, for those of us who bought a bunch of mounted conquistadors, now we have something to do with them. We got a new Nuorto, it's that Gatling gun conquistador, got a new pose. It looks like they modified his bunker, and so it looks like some kind of an upgrade for him. The big cannon that they have, the Havoc cannon, where it had those 3-barreled cannons, they actually created 2 models to come with that cannon, and they're the Pizarro brothers, and they're 2 dudes basically loading the cannon and firing the cannon. So that's pretty neat. I could see those coming on a large base where they all fit on the base, and then there's a new female conquistador that rounds out the team, and then Amadeus, he is the plastic model from the original Laser 8 that
was the Jane character, where they now changed it. They using that sculpt because it was very ornate armor. They just moved that model, gave it a new name, and he is a conquistador. So that model will also be in that posse set. So it's something to do with your old Wayward 8 model for Jane. So that's the conquistador posse set. Again, you want to hear details about each one of the new characters in those posse sets for the Tainted Biology or the Conquistador posse. Go check out the Q&A video, the Facebook live post. You can actually watch the video now. Just find it in the Dark Council post. Just search down in the history. They talk about Wild West Exodus first. After that, they then showed us sketches and teases of some more Atama. They're a newer version. They're a Tesla version of UR bots. And so they carry a different designator. So they carry a TX designator. So the new TX design, we saw 2 sketches. One, just to basically sketch out of what the design looks like, heavily armored. These are an upgraded version that is only being used by the Union and then some of their allies. So they kind of teaser that these may eventually show up on a global scale as the Union steps into more of the wide world combat skirmishes. So those sketches were teased. So that should be interesting to see how they introduce those into the Union.
I think if you can't find the Q&A from May 4th on the Facebook page, they did say that they were going to post it on YouTube also, so you can do a search on YouTube for it. So hey, Brian, go over that other new teaser posse.
So one of the newer posses that Stuart and Wild West Exodus has teased us with is the Felipe Espinosa's Bloody Espinosa posse.
I'm glad you said that because I don't know if I could have.
Okay, so those of you who like to play the Golden Army, these are some of the Golden Army models, and they've taken Felipe Espinosa. I don't know if anybody has seen or remember the Beasts of War did a week of Wild West Exodus during the second Kickstarter, and they teased the Bloody Espinosa Wave 2 hired hands. So instead of that, we're getting actual named Bloody Espinosa posses. And so this posse is a 6-model posse box that Felipe Espinosa, who is a face currently, he has the underboss trait, which allows him to be a boss. So when his posse box comes out, he'll get a themed posse card. So you'll be able to play his themed posse. And his themed posse, here's a brief read-up, is one of the most ruthless and treacherous bandits to curse the American frontier, leading the twisted Marachi band, the Bloody Espinosas. Philippe has a dreaded reputation as a bounty hunter and a raider. The music played by his family of liars and cutthroats is terrifyingly jarring as it accompanies them while they go about their bloody butchery. The hard-faced Jose and scarred Lucia Espinosa are never too far from their murderous older brother, while the youngest, Pedro, is content to amuse himself by playing a tune and adding to his collection of trophies cut from his victims. Viviana Espinosa was once like his brothers, but found true love with the beautiful Sophia Antonella. Wanting to leave the blighted band for a new life, a fight with his brother Jose mortally wounded him. As he lay dying, his tainted soul transformed him into a drooling hex beast. His wife Sophia could not be parted from him even in this new form, and nursed a shred of his former personality from the hulk of flesh and pain he had become. Now the 6 are united in a song of murder and mayhem that will only end in death. Man, I love the way that they've added fluff to these posses. That red, so cool. And the only thing better than that description is the models themselves. And they've literally, it's 4 new models to tag along with, Philippe and Antonella. My favorite is the little brother, Pedro. Holy moly, he looks like a classic bard. He's got a guitar that is obviously RJ juiced, and he's got his right hand playing the guitar is a robotic hand with extra long fingers, so he can make sure and hit the whammy bar. It's an awesome model. I can't wait for this model. He's got 1 foot, those iconic poses. He's got 1 foot up on a rock. Well, no, it's not a rock. It's a guitar case, and it's closed on a hand. So they tease about him collecting parts, and there's a hand sticking out at this guitar case. So, yeah, no, this is going to be an awesome model. I can't wait for it. So, yeah, it's one of many of these teasers. I don't know when it comes out. Stuart hasn't given us a heads up on when. More than likely because it's a new 3D render.
Yeah.
These guys are probably early next year, more than likely. But unless things change and they surprise us with these sooner, I would expect this to be a little ways off.
Yeah, they do kind of do that. They're giving us these little teasers of something coming down the line that they're working on, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's like, oh, pre-order.
Right.
So that was the teasers that we got coming down the pipeline. They're always good for teasers. We have some new pre-order stuff that just popped up the last week or so, and they finally are giving people, which I know people are clamoring for this, the Wayward 8. The Wayward 8 is up for pre-order. It's all the new sculpts that they have been, it seems like they've been teasing us with this forever.
Oh, yeah, pretty much.
Right, so this was one of the first things that the War Cradle began to produce, I guess, pre-production into plastic. So the original goal was to have the Wayward 8 and the Deadly 7 come out at the same time in a 2-player box set. But, production, they don't want those type of things to get in the way of releasing the game. So because of the development of these as plastic kits, it just takes longer. So they didn't want to rush it. So that's when they went with the Red Oak box set, which I think is a better way to go because all the models in that set were already tried and true, and they all already worked. So we got that 2-player set much faster. So the Wayward 8 should be similar to the Deadly 7. So it'll probably be a big sprue, and everybody's on the sprue. Pretty much most of the models in that group all got either a complete revision or significant changes. And I guess the least changed would be Sun Totem, who his changes are cosmetic. I mean, his pose is pretty much the same, but he definitely has more details in his outfit, which he was covered in details in the first one, but now the details definitely let you know that, hey, he's a doctor, and justifies him having sawbones as part of his, special ability. So it should be really interesting. But he's the least changed. I think Wash or Hicks, his is the second least, but he got a completely new head, and he looks way cooler with that new head. You definitely will recognize the features, who he's an homage to versus his older sculpt. But yeah, every one of the new sculpts are looking really cool. I can't wait to get them. So
I'm really looking forward to the new Marcus Wayward sculpt. I never really liked the original all that much. I didn't feel like it really captured the character very well. The new one is great with his foot up on the treasure chests and everything. That's the one I'm really looking forward to.
Right. No, yeah, that one, the new river looks really cool. Or it's just the whole set looks like a really good upgrade from most of those models. I'm sure there's a few of us that'll be buying more than one, so we can create all their mounted versions.
At least one of us.
Wait, hey. So yeah, if anyone wants to send me their extra,
hey now, don't go begging.
Well, to go along with that, the pre-order for the Wayward 8, they also put up a pre-order for Hex Beast. So there is 5 different sculpts for basically a pack of Hex Beast. They're all disgusting looking, and I want them.
Yeah, they are. They're all bulbous and
Look.
pussy. And,
Oh yeah.
ugh.
I'm all over that.
Okay then.
The things I take pleasure in. What can I say? But yeah, they're the kind of model that they look fantastic to paint. They look like they're so much fun to paint. I mean, you could do so many different color schemes with a model like this.
Yeah, call out to Mac. He actually posted a picture on the on Facebook of his juiced Hex Beast, and it looked as gross and creepy as it should. It was really cool. It really turned out great. I think a friend of mine saw that picture on my Facebook, over my shoulder during the week and was like, "What is that?" And that's the exact effect you want when you see one.
Well, they remind me of the Nurgle, the way how those were just disgusting looking.
Yes.
And those were fun to paint too.
Oh.
They remind me of the Thing.
Yeah, I could see that.
Especially now that we have the two Hex dogs in that one picture.
You don't know, Tom?
Nah, it just looks like someone threw up.
Kind of sounds like you're getting ready to throw up.
Okay, so no one send Tom any of those Hex Beasts.
So both the Hex Beast and the Wayward 8 they're pre-order right now, and they should start shipping the end of May, May 31st. And then we should see another wave of pre-orders coming up.
By then.
Yeah. Leading into the end of the month, they're going to be going right into a convention, which is the UK Expo. So basically, I believe we'll see something come out for that. I know they're planning on making sure they have Wayward 8 sets on hand at the Expo, but I can foresee maybe even some more sets that they might have on hand for pickup at the Expo, which also means that we might be able to order them at that point.
Yeah. Because, kind of going into what's new, they had, we got some new terrain. And, for example, they had the bank was up for pre-order very short time. And then, their typical pre-order is usually a month. I don't think the bank went pre-order for a month. I think it went about a week.
Yeah, it was 4 days actually.
And then all of a sudden it's out. So
we have a bank. You can pre-order it now, and they'll deliver on Saturday.
That's what it seemed like. So yeah,
it was pretty good.
New terrain
for the bank, and
what else? And
some more bases. So along with the bank, they were ready to roll out the new base toppers, and the new base toppers are the Union Badlands base toppers. And they similar to what they did with the Red Oak base toppers. These are very much the desert, cracked earth bases, but they added some of those little details like skulls and different things sitting in the dust or in the dirt. And then the large base topper, if you order the large base topper kit, it comes with one large base, but then it comes with scatter terrain or scatter pieces. So they're like little, skull and crossbones and some little gadgets that you can add to bases. So it's like very neat. They did that in previous base toppers. So it's neat to see all these little pieces of resin that you can add to your bosses or whatever, your special models bases to make them stand out.
Makes them a little more unique then to you. So that was what we have for teasers and what's up for pre-order and what's new on the site as of right now. And as we mentioned, we're bound to see plenty of new stuff coming out pretty soon as we're getting going into the con season. It's the beginning of summer, so they're starting to roll out these products with the shows coming out.
Speaking of going into summer, it's a good time to maybe start looking at your leagues because they do have some prize support available. The Gunslinger OP prize kit has just become available.
Yeah, that looks pretty sexy too. I mean, the stuff that they got in that, you got some poker chips and you got different badges that you can get.
Right, they're gold versions of their standard poker chips, which are they just look real sharp. And then there's some badges you get. There's a bronze, a silver, and a gold badge you can get. It's a nice little kit.
And I think what you need to do to basically get involved in that is just talk to your local store, because I believe that's how they're making it available, is if the store contacts them, they can get a hold of this kit, and then you can set up a league. And I don't know how many weeks a league would. I guess it's probably up to the organizer how many weeks you want to do it. I know it starts slow, so basically anybody can get into it, and you kind of learn as you go. So each week you're slowly building onto your posse and making it bigger and bigger. Yeah, that's kind of a neat thing. I think that's a real good way to get new people into the game and even still be fun for veterans too.
Yep, and you get a little unique little prize support out of that.
Bling is always good.
Indeed.
Well, guys, I think that about does it for the news for this episode. I think we rambled on long enough. Let's go ahead and finish this out.
Well, hey, man, it was a great conversation again, guys. Glad we all could be here to share, our ramblings about Wild West Exodus. It was good to chat some of these things and bring you some of the news. Can't wait to talk about Wild West Exodus again later. Make sure you drop comments. You have any questions you want us to try to get answered, leave those in the comments. Share.
Yeah, like you were saying when we were talking about in our main segment with the Posse Building, we want to hear your guys' feedback on our 3 posse lists that we made. And yeah, thanks for listening, you guys, and tune in again. Hopefully we can keep up our steam. We love doing this, and we're getting some pretty good feedback. So anyway, guys, if you guys are brainstorming and steam's coming out of your ears while you're posse building and crunching numbers and trying to fit that last face in your gun chamber of the posse chart, or if you're wrapping up your extra iron horses to put in the mail and send them speedy delivery to our one and only Tom, remember to always ride with the sun at your back and always roll those crits. Until next time, we'll see you later. This is Eric saying take it easy.
Y'all going back now, you hear?
Good night, guys.
Good night. Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by the Blackhoof Saloon, y'all. We hope you enjoyed your visit. Feel free to get a hold of us with comments or questions via the interweb, and shoot us a telegraph at blackhoofsaloon@gmail.com, or find us on the Facebook at Blackhoof WWX Podcast. Music provided for use by Ross Bugden and can be found at one of his YouTube channels, Ross Bugden Music or Ross Bugden Composer. Until your next visit, ride with the sun at your back and always roll those crits.
Four medium oval bases to outfit all of my light vehicles that need to switch.
Well, that's what you get for having 3 of all of them.
Yep.
Take that.
Take that.
I did discover the downside.
One of you guys want to start with what's pre-order and new?
No.
No. Wow.
Sorry, I'm looking something. I'm looking.
He was Brian's very intense right now.
It wasn't proper. We're like, all right, we're done.
We're done. I'm out. Peace. I gotta get back to the table. I got a good hand. I'm always so paranoid about this thing not recording, so I check every little thing.
That's why you're our director and sound engineer, and
Yep, you get all the glory.
I get all the glory.
Yeah.
or you will at some point.
I'll just take a free meal or something, free McDonald's.
I'll send you one of my iron horses when I get them.